I guess I'll start. So thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate you all showing up, especially during this extremely tumultuous week. I guess I could call it that. But I'm really happy that Yevgeniya could join us. And I met Yevgeniya years ago because I used to live in Wisconsin and was working in the UW system as well. So I considered you a colleague in the system. So Yevgeniya Kaganovich is a Belarus-born artist who is now living and working in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She has a hybrid practice that encompasses jewelry, metalsmithing, sculpture, and installation. She has received an MFA from the State University of New York, New Paltz, and a BFA in metals and jewelry from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Yevgeniya has been an active art practitioner since 1992, exhibiting her work nationally and internationally. Her work has received a number of awards and has been published widely. And I'm so happy that you could join us. And she will be doing the lecture this evening, and then also will be working with our graduate students next Friday in a seminar course. So in just a minute, I'll pass the screen to her. And so if you have questions, please keep yourself muted and feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat. And at the end of her presentation, I'll be the MC, so I'll voice back the questions to her, and we'll make sure that everybody is heard. Sound good? Okay, I take your silence as yes. Yevgeniya, take it away. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks so much, Jessica. I'm gonna share my screen here so we can get started. Okay, is this working? We're good? Yeah?
Yes, great.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really grateful, Jessica, to you for inviting me and to the Ball State School of Art for supporting this visit, making it possible. And I very much look forward to spending next Friday with the students in the seminar and critiques, albeit online, but considering our new reality here, it's actually possible for us to do that, right? To separate these visits. So they'll work. It's a very strange time to be speaking to you, of course. I hope you're okay. I hope you're finding meaning in what you do. I've been kind of struggling to reconcile the urgency of this moment and the glacial nature of the pursuits that I've kind of committed my life to. And I've been finding a lot of meaning in taking care of others, supporting and championing them, particularly our students. And so I'm currently in my 19th year of teaching at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, heading the jewelry metalsmithing area and digital fabrication and design area. And as Jessica just told you, I have this extensive jewelry metalsmithing background. But while I consider myself an object maker, not strictly a metalsmith, my current practice continues to explore issues relevant to craft. It's kind of conditioned by that training. All of it is informed by my training, my interest in craft and crafted objects, my interest in wearability in the body. I'm also very aware of my privileged position as an artist in academia. I feel that it's my responsibility to make speculative work, and I really owe the understanding of that role to my Image Gray, who talks regularly about how she has to make weird work. And so I really take that to heart. I want to contribute to expanding the understanding of the applied tradition, and I want to challenge its existing boundaries. Sorry, I'm not sure. Navigation is kind of weird for some reason. So with that in mind, my research is developed in 3 distinct but related directions. Sculptural objects that relate to corporeal body and examine function as a medium and a language. Well, jewelry that explores cultural and social functions of adornment, those functions beyond utility, as well as materiality. And installations that attempt to locate our human experience within architectural and cultural constructs. The sculptural objects I make relate to the body and play with function. These balloon mouthpieces have been inflated with helium and tethered to stanchions. As with all of other work in the series, the piece orchestrates the engagement with the viewer. It has these very specific directives. So the height of the mask, the stanchions open to one side, the positioning of the chairs make two people face each other when this object is in use. This was the iteration of this project for my solo exhibition at Gulf Coast University in Florida. And I had to figure out how to pleat latex to shorten these pieces to get them into that ceiling height. So that was fun. But I also had this opportunity to install them in this, space that was air conditioned. And so there's a lot of movement of air. And I positioned them super, super close to each other, but they were never actually touching. There was kind of quivering in the space, but never quite touching. So that brought in some interesting tension. So because of that exact indexing of the body, the object is quite specific in how we're to engage with it, but the purpose and the implication of this interaction is quite uncertain. Does the viewer provide the object with breath? Does the object supply the viewer with some kind of substance? This very carefully orchestrated exchange remains ambiguous. And I'm interested in this kind of ambiguity. I'm interested in implying and misusing function. There's an impression of face so that it's clear that that's where your mouth would go. It's important that this work exists on the scale of the human body, and while that wearability may be actual or implied, I want the viewer to be able to imagine putting it on. So I've been focusing on implications of function, its possibilities and potential as a rhetorical device. And in my earlier works, the function was suggested and immediately denied, resulting in objects that were essentially dysfunctional. In exploring the difficulty of communication, for example, I made objects that look like devices that may enhance or amplify speech in some way, but upon closer examination, you found out that the exchange is hindered or altogether impossible. With this work, I am aiming for the function to be transformative and not simply self-defeating. I want to make objects that through their actual use comment on aspects of our existence, our interactions, our bodies. It's important that the work invites the viewer's participation, whether actual or imagined, and it's through this kind of engagement that the purpose and the implication of each piece are considered. And my playing with function, my kind of misuse on function becomes evident. So this piece connects two masks by a hollow tube. On each mask, the nostrils are open, so it's possible to breathe into the piece. Two people then share the finite amount of air within the piece in their lungs. They're urgently connected and kept at a certain distance by the device. This work is from 2010, and it's as far back as I'm going for this presentation today. Everything else is more recent. But believe me, the irony of this piece, the fact that it keeps two people at about 6 feet is not lost on me. This piece is articulated really similarly aesthetically, but it functions or misfunctions quite differently. There's an inflatable volume in the middle to which two masks are connected. The nostrils are closed, but the mouths have openings. You can blow or speak into the piece. There's a one-way valve in each mouth so that the air, sound, words, whatever it is that go into and mix in the balloon don't come back out. A psychological distance is created then by just the sheer complexity and the awkwardness of engaging it. So the objects I make mark the body as a site of exchange. In installation work, I attempt to locate our experience or human body within architectural and cultural constructs and consider our existence within and our effects on those constructs. This large-scale project called Strange Vegetation, and it was a response to a decorative interior of the Decorative Arts Museum here in Milwaukee. Specifically, I was responding to the Zubair wallpaper with the exotic plants and floral ironwork that's in in the space. This museum is the largest collection of Cyril Kolnick's ironwork. The site-specific installation responds to the architectural interior of this institution, and it's a system of physically interconnected, identical plant-like forms made out of latex. And I was really kind of haunted by this wallpaper, especially the fact that there's sort of like this horizon line that's implied or actually painted on this block printed paper. And so I made these individual bulb-like volumes that extend upwards from the floor, reaching out from below that horizon line on the wallpaper. It's like there are bulbs that originate underground. And then with the aid of electronics, the system is articulated through a regular inflation and deflation cycle. It breathes. My collaborator on this piece, Nathaniel Stern, wrote the custom software and designed the physical systems, the physical computing system that's responsible for the piece breathing. This artificial organism has been given a life cycle and requires tending to. It sort of stands in the symbiotic relationship as well as in opposition to the decorative floral interior. It seems to be an extension and a mutation of that interior. It kind of invades the space it shares with us. And it also has an artificial life cycle that is very much at odds with the exotic flowers that are always in perfect bloom on the wall. I'm going to show you just a quick video of this piece, but I have to unshare my screen for that reason. Jessica, let me know if something is not working properly as we're looking at this.
Will do.
So there should be sound. There's no sound. Oh, here we go. So the piece inhaled, set for 2 minutes, and then exhaled. There's kind of this comical moment when the lens kind of flop onto the floor and you can actually hear it. Wow. Okay. So let me just get back to slideshow. We back?
Yes, all good.
Great, thank you. Another project, Grow, was a series of durational installations throughout the city of Milwaukee in public buildings, as well as surrounding areas. At each location, the system of physically interconnected plant-like forms, simulating a self-propagating organism, grows over time. It's made out of plastic bags, and the layers have been fused together to create this kind of surface similar to leather or skin, sewn into these plant-like or bulb-like volumes. And they're also connected with the crocheted plastic bag thread, stuffed with plastic bags, which creates the system made out of a singular material, recycled plastic bags. At each location, there's this official recycling bin. I periodically collected the bags and added onto each system. So if you visited any particular public location, you could kind of watch it grow over a period of time. They sort of acted like weeds. They grew into unused and overlooked spaces, niches, columns, stairwells, and any peripheral architectural element in a public location. The project launched in October 2012 at the Milwaukee's Linden Sculpture Garden. And since then, there have been subsequent plantings at multiple locations throughout the city of Milwaukee, including the Urbana-Champaign Center and the Milwaukee City Hall, as well as in Florida, Texas, and Pennsylvania. Prior to 2020, I was working on a Wuhan installation of this project. There's also a public component that at the time was very new to my practice. People were involved in multiple ways. They could simply contribute plastic bags, unwanted plastic bags to any location. They could visit the locations with the workshops that we held at those locations, and they could participate in these public workshops on manipulating plastic bags as raw material. I was also really fortunate to have a number of students involved over the course of 4 years on this project as undergraduate researchers. We have this fantastic undergraduate research program in the UW system where students and faculty get to apply for specific projects as a research team. And I really love working with students in that capacity. And it's transformed my practice in many, many ways. And but it's really, the public workshops here, we held them monthly in the Linden Sculpture Garden, and then in between also at other locations. And it's been really interesting how people engaged in the project, from kind of very surface conversations to people who started coming every month. And so what ended up as tending to this artificial organism and trying to, take care of it and grow it ended up tending to a community. And so that public involvement, that public participation also underscored my initial intention for this project. I knew this, but I didn't really understand it fully until people got involved. Like, no matter how much I worked on this project, and I worked on it pretty much daily, no matter how many people helped, no matter how long it took, we were never able to keep up with the speed of refuse, right? Like, our bins were always full. There's always more material to process. The goal of this project was to transform this artificial manipulated material into this sort of seemingly unchecked, feral, and opportunistic growth. And then to visualize and punctuate that reuse and juxtapose it with the slow, methodical, and labor-intensive making, and to a degree to play with control, craftiness, and precision. And this is what my studio would sometimes look like in preparation for any one of these plantings. They're just sort of literally on every available surface. And I never anticipated a single project spanning over 4 years, but the slow production nature paired up with the need for the project to be able to physically grow into a truly public space really necessitated that duration. This was the iteration of the object of the project at the Milwaukee City Hall, which is a really beautiful building. We got to work there for an entire summer, almost for a month actually. And in addition to kind of filling all the usual nooks and crannies with the sculptures, I also installed them on the mosaic floor, kind of confusing this growth with the decorative interior detail. And like at all of the other locations, the forms could be moved around for cleaning or for events. They could be treated in this very informal way, but you had to deal with them. They're in the way. And so the Milwaukee City Hall really ended up being the venue that I felt like the project was really waiting for. You know, we had people come for workshops, but we also had people that work there every day come and see it grow and encounter us when we were working in the space or doing workshops. And so it sort of did what it needed to do, I felt like. And after that, we had a project finale back at the Linden Sculpture Garden. So as a culmination to the project, we transplanted all the forms back to Linden as a final installation. And it was really determined by how many forms existed at that point and how they developed. So we just sort of organized them that way. My original idea from the get-go was to recycle all the forms at the end of the project, but having them in all of these public spaces and understanding how I was asking people to engage with them, we kind of changed course here, and we had this Come Get Your Grow transplant weekend at Linden. And so many people came, got their transplants, and then they took them home and they had to deal with these consequences of our actions or our collective actions, right? Even though we transform an enormous amount of refuse into these material and labor-intensive objects, we still had to deal with them, right? Like we had to put them somewhere. It didn't really solve anything. I also installed them outside, partially because there's so many forms, but they really resonated differently at the Linden Sculpture Garden between the trees and the 60s and 70s sculptures that occupy that space. And I was really trying to think about how things grow in nature and respond in installing the objects that way. So the project ended up somewhere between sculpture and nature. And that's the exact implication I wanted to make. I wanted these plants to appear as a plausible ecological development. And that really resonated when they were installed outside. I was speculating about this, of course, right? Like I was speculating about the system that sort of comes into being from traces that we leave behind. But of course, the scary part is, you know, at the very beginning of the project, I found out an equivalent to this is sort of a version of this is actually happening. Plastic compounds have made their ways into geological layer. There's now volcanic rock that with plastic compounds in it. And then this happened. On the very last day of the project, I came across a perfect mushroom ring, which was nuts because I came to the Linden Sculpture Garden monthly over a period of 4 years, and I never saw mushrooms there before. And so naturally, I had to install the forms as part of this mushroom ring. It was kind of the most perfect ending to this project. It might have yet another life cycle, or at least the materials that I've developed for this project will have another life cycle. I'm currently working as part of a mycological focused artist collective. Mycology is the study of mushrooms. My collective includes 3 other artists, Jim Charles, my husband, Lisa Moline, and Lane Hall. And this was one of our earliest experiments, growing pearl oyster mushrooms out of the grow plastic bag forms. And so we kind of launched into what I call color studies. I made these pristine white cubes, and then Lane and Lisa stuffed them with straw inoculated with mushroom spores, and then Jim and I tended to these cubes to grow mushrooms out of them. And so the only color of these pieces are from the mushroom themselves. We grew pink, purple, and yellow oysters out of them. And so as they grew, they sort of distorted the pristine cubes. We're currently working on more color studies, just juxtaposing the different color of plastic bags and the mushrooms. So pink oysters on blue cubes, yellow oysters on gray, and purple on green. So that 4-year durational project and these growing experiments led me to think about time and matter and transformation. And so naturally, I started another multi-year project. This current project aims to explore the experience and existence of things, but not through our human lens, but kind of through their own unique phenomenology. In a larger body of work, my goal is to examine the separate possible lives a tree can live out when acted upon by humans, changing into furniture, paper, and sometimes back again through the lens of the object themselves. And so I'm examining three archetypes here: tree, chair, and paper. For this project, I ask, if a tree were to intuit a chair, what would it be like? By growing and shaping trees into chairs through a processes of bending and grafting on trees, this piece imagines the tree's conception and understanding of the chair. We think it's going to take about 4 to 5 years, but over this time, I'm growing a number of chairs from saplings at the Linden Sculpture Garden. I was granted another long-term residency there, which is really fortunate. And so the idea that this will produce usable sculptures in the end. And so last spring and March of 2019, we've planted 34 saplings of poplar and Quaking aspen in patterns that define the chair designs, and started grafting multiple branches, building supports, and bending trees into these chair shapes. I'm learning how to graft for this, but of course, this is not what branches want to do. They don't want to grow at the right angles to the tree trunks. So it's very challenging. So it was very exciting to see the first grafts when they started taking and budding and then leafing. We use this wax tape for binding the grafts, and which it eventually disintegrates. And something that I haven't fully explored, but I'm interested in, is the aesthetic potential for these joints or scars. There are a total of 3 sets of chairs planted, 2 facing one another, 2 facing away from one another, and then this pair side by side overlooking a pond, and then Linden Sculpture Garden. So with this particular configuration, we planted these really tiny trees and patterns, and they would grow and bend around these supports and eventually be grafted together at the back of the chairs. So this is done at the very beginning when they just first started growing. You can see how much they've grown in just 1 year. So of course, working on this project in 2020 has been completely different. I've been super fortunate that while the Linden Sculpture Garden itself was closed to public, I still had the ability to go there weekly and, this spring making grafts and tend to the trees. And for a long, long time, it was the only place I could go to weekly. And so those trips became really important. I work extensively with my student researchers on this. And so one of them, Lily, was really funny. She was in charge of building these supports. And so she used these railings, or like chair legs, to make the supports. And so the chairs have sort of like chair leg supports. And so this is what they look like at the very beginning of the summer. Then they made the system of plastic tubes to send the saplings through so they would grow and bend into the specific shape that we wanted. And this is where they kind of got by the end of last summer. This is Sophia, Lily, and Lisden. These are my 3 student researchers. It's been really amazing to work with them on this. And this was a really funny moment. We're trying to plan these, each chair would have 9 trees that would compose it eventually. And so we had to dig these square holes to put these little saplings in. And of course, like, here's a bunch of metalsmith there with rulers and, string and like measuring it all out. And then we had 2 land managers who are fantastic guys who've been helping us with this project. And so like we're digging holes, and their hole is like a hole to plant a tree in, and our hole is perfectly square, same depth everywhere. It's just pretty funny having these highly skilled people working on this, working just on digging holes. Like we do it, like we do everything. So Lily, Lisden, and Sophia are still the student researchers I work with now, but of course we haven't been able to do things as a group. This summer, Sophia and I took turns in the middle of the summer just standing to the trees. And then we've been gathering online and working on different projects kind of separately. I definitely miss working with them regularly all together and seeing their faces. And so with this project, there's this very limited amount of time in spring, about a week total when the grafting can happen. And the rest of the season is just preparing the binding, tending to those grafts, tending to the trees, a lot of weeding. So it's kind of at the very beginning still at this point, only about a year and a few months in. Does the paper remember being a tree? Are they aware of each other's and their divergent fates? Can I return paper to its original state as a tree? Can I reverse engineer a tree out of paper and chairs? Reverse a trope? I examined my methodology of making as potential for this transmutation through material experimentation. In one of these experiments, we're rolling a log out of collected newspapers, and then the cross section of that looks very much like tree rings. This log has been rolled with paraffin wax as a binder, cut in half, and the surface finished to a smooth finish. This piece is made the exact same way, out of the exact same materials, but it's rolled tighter, which strangely resulted in less color showing in the cross section. In some other experiments, for example, we're pressing paper mulch into kind of an imagined space between bark and a tree trunk, producing this kind of ghostly shelf. All resulting speculative objects attempting to see, imagine, or remember a tree from a perspective of paper. If we're a tree to foresee an existence of a chair, would that chair be organized by the tree's internal logic? Since a tree is a fractal object, would that chair, imagined by that tree, be fractal? Would it be a system of chairs connected by roots? Can I uncarve wood, unmulch paper, unmake a chair? So this is another one of these sort of speculative objects asking these questions. This object is made out of a complete layer of scrap wood, the largest component being a frame of a chair with 4 smaller chairs coming off of its legs, which in turn have smaller chairs coming off their legs, and so on. And this is a studio at about 5 in the morning before an installation, and Sophia with all these tiny little chairs everywhere. This is Lily and I assembling the piece. And this is a second installation of the piece in February of 2020 at the Wisconsin Biennial at the Museum of Wisconsin Art. Because of how the piece goes together, I figured out it's not really a piece that can travel very far. So the only place it's been shown is Wisconsin so far. My practice is really not linear with multiple things happening in parallels. And so I started making some wearable pieces utilizing the materials and processes I've been developing in Making Grow, the plastic bag project. And I kind of made these pieces as a way to balance out the durational project that was taking 4 years with, and so balance that with finishing some concrete objects. And we're also collecting all plastic bags, right? Not just white ones. And some interesting patterns started to emerge. So I kind of had to make stuff out of that. So for example, this piece is all the blue bags necklace, and it's made entirely out of all of the blue bags that we've collected over the period of 3 years, which is when I made that piece. And it turns out the blue is extremely rare in plastic bags, but there are very many shades of it. And so this piece has all of those shades and all of the blue plastic bags that were collected over a period of 3 years. Red is way more common. And so this is some of the red bags necklace. It's made out of some of the red bags that we've collected. It's so ubiquitous that, you know, if I made a piece out of all the red bags, you probably wouldn't be able to lift it. but the shades that it comes in are really limited. So this piece is made out of Sandex red and the Speedball shiny red. With these wearable pieces, I'm using the color plastic bag sheet, that leathery surface that I've developed, and then the fabrication methods that were used in the previous project. I was trying to make objects that look deflated. And really utilizing the inherent material properties, like first discovering them, then really extensively utilizing them. So it's possible to fuse the seams, it's possible to have movable joints. And so then I'm articulating the hinges here with the different colors to sort of highlight that a little bit. I'm also thinking about what it means for us to carry these materials on our bodies. And so I started weighing them down. Besides being plastic bags, they're also weighted down. So there are these kind of relatively small pieces, but they're heavy. And so while the plastic bag may be an unusual choice for material for jewelry, I'm using my making skills and traditional craft processes. I was really fortunate to have residency at the University of Oregon, and Yevgeniya Kaganovichis, who is a fiber artist and faculty there, taught me how to weave, which was really incredible. So this piece utilizes, and it has this accumulation of sheet, crochet surfaces, and woven surfaces, all fused together. I was invited to respond to an object from the textile collection at the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for an exhibition called Points of Departure, which celebrated that collection. And so I got to rummage through these archives, which was really, really incredible. And I picked this small hand-woven basket from Indonesia as an inspiration for this piece. And so this piece borrows a number of formal cues from the original object, the oval shape and the woven appearance of the crocheted surface. The original basket was made out of natural fibers. We gave the object its rich brown color. The new wearable object is made out of reused plastic bags as a base material, deriving its color from the color that they came in, their natural color. The original basket was likely made to contain something precious. I utilize variable formats as we come to associate jewelry with preciousness. Instead of containing something precious, the wearable object itself implies preciousness, juxtaposing the idea of preciousness against the discarded artificial material that it's made out of. And this is the most recent piece I made for the series. Made for a multi-institutional project, Micro-Macro, which Jessica and her students also participated in. It was just a really phenomenal collection of work. And so this piece is called The Weight of Things. And again, the idea of preciousness against the discarded artificial material that it's made out of. It's kind of exploring that idea. So I use the traditional craft processes, crocheting, to contrast it with the slow, labor-intensive making, and with the speed of refuse. Small stitches, vast land fields. This materially and time-dense object is a physical manifestation of numerous bags discarded in the time spent in a futile attempt to reclaim them. And so this piece is also weighted down. So in addition to being crocheted out of plastic bags and stuffed with plastic bags, it actually has weights. So it's really prominent on the body. To really kind of make us ponder what it means for us to carry these materials on our bodies. So many of you probably are familiar with Radical Jewelry Makeover, which is a project by Ethical Metalsmith. And that's an organization that was started by Susie Gonch and Christina Miller originally. And so Rgm is an international community jewelry mining and recycling project focused on education and collaboration. And it brings together jewelers working together to examine mining issues while making innovative jewelry from recycled sources. And so I'm sure many of you are aware of this project. We hosted Rgm Wisconsin in 2018 at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, had multiple institutions participating, many students, many community members interacted with the ethical metalsmith and Kathleen and Susie, who were co-directors at the time. And so it really allowed us to engage and expand our community in a new way. I also got to participate in Rgm Artist Project in 2019, which is an offshoot of Rgm, where artists are invited to create a series of works using donated jewelry that's left over from the previous Rgm donation drives. And so as a part of this, I asked Kathleen Kennedy, who was the director for the project at the time, to send me the plastic bags that the jewelry came in, right? Like the unwanted jewelry was all turned in paper or plastic bags. And so I asked for those to be sent to me. And these are some of the pieces that I made for the project. So I've received a bunch of bags and I made thread out of the colors that I wanted. And so that's how they were sort of defined, is by those bags that I received, and then the costume jewelry that was encased in the crocheted surfaces. And so some were sort of encased in their entirety, and some were sort of these crocheted cozies that stretched over and held tight to the original forms. And then some were sort of bulging over the original decorative elements and in these sort of plastic bag stuff volumes. And then I also utilized some of the original pin backs or earring findings that came with the pieces. And some other ones, like the pendant here, were encased in their entirety. So the only evidence of the form is sort of the overall shape. Throughout the various modes of my practice, materiality is a constant. It's a constant interest and subject. In this body of work, I was making these iconic images of jewelry by transforming small freshwater pearls into an image of a large pearl necklace. I cast the pearls into silicone rubber, kind of magnifying them. In this piece, I exaggerated the size of the pearl, so it sort of exaggerate that idea that they're being amplified by the droplet. In addition to this investigation, the pearl clasp necklace series utilizes altered images of a traditional pearl clasp in porcelain pearls. The clasps flatten, inflate, and gradate and deform. They, of course, lose their function in this transformation and become decorative elements. I cast porcelain slip into these approximation of pearls. They gained their nacre from actual freshwater pearls that I crushed and kiln fired at an extremely high temperature onto the surface of porcelain. The melted pearls made this transparent blue glaze, which was totally an incidental discovery that I made during a residency in Kecskemét in Hungary. And so once I knew that the freshwater pearls would transform into this kind of puddles of luster on the surface of porcelain, which sort of looks soft and slightly deformed, I just started crushing pearls and firing them onto the surface. And so I'm not sure if you can see it in this image well, but the light blue color on the porcelain is the melted pearl. So the fusing the two precious materials, the freshwater pearl and porcelain, changes both. It creates a new kind of precious jewel. So through these various modes, my work is defined by my training in an applied tradition. And my handling of materials is informed by sensibilities that are prevalent in making craft and crafted objects. That range of specific processes, methodologies, and materials really enhance my ability to engage topics that are inherent to craft: variability, the body, and function. And so that variety of materials, format, and processes allow me to address these subjects, ultimately resulting in a hybrid practice. And I want to finish with something that's been a source of strength and comfort in these uncertain times for me, and something that's given me another way to tend to our community, the Hand Metal Project. I'm sure many of you are familiar or maybe even participated in the project. But if you don't know, Iris Eichenberg and Jimena Rios started this massive global effort to honor pandemic frontline healthcare workers with hand medals. And so this is just a shot from the Hand Metal Project site, and it sort of diagrams the whole process. There's makers around the world. Last I heard, there were about 3,500 makers around the world. And so the makers make, the hand keepers collect the medals and find the hand giver, who is a healthcare worker themselves. And then the hand givers are going to honor their colleagues on November 8th, all on the same day, all around the globe. It's pretty amazing. So I'm the hand keeper for our region, and we've had all of our students participating in this project. And our hand giver is also one of our students, Andrea Ball, who is on the left here. She's in the National Guard, and she was mobilized as a member of her field hospital unit very early on in the pandemic. It was kind of crazy. You know, we were running around trying to find some PPE for her when our studios were already shut down. But she's the person responsible for getting the 180 medals that we made to the community, that our community made to three units. So the emergency department at the VA hospital, the VA ICU, and the National Guard, her combat support hospital, which is the field hospital unit. And so these 180 people being honored will receive their medals on November 8th, along with many, many other healthcare workers around the globe. My colleague Erica Meyer coordinating the efforts of finalizing all of the pieces, and she's here on the right. You can see her. She's putting the medals in envelopes, and she also came up with this amazing way for us to tend to and grow our community because of the various changes to delivery formats. You know, our intros are fully online, our advanced classes are hybrid, with 2 students working in the studio at any one time. So we're not seeing people in the hallways, we're not seeing them between classes, students are not seeing each other working late in the studio. And so Erica initiated these Tuesday night area social events where we all get to share our work and concerns and connect in a much less formal way, right? And so last Tuesday, Iris and Jimena actually presented to our community about the social practices around the world that the Hand Metal Project is based on. And then we had Haley Bates join from Colorado with her students, and it was just really wonderful. So I'm finding a lot of meaning and comfort in this work right now, in connecting with others and then tending to our community. This is the election night in our house. The last thing I want to say is I hope you're okay. I hope you find meaning in the things you do, and then I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and each other.
Yay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. I know everyone's probably taking all this in, but does anybody have any questions? If you do, feel free to type it in the chat. And
here.
What? Oh, yeah.
This is the first time I got to see, you know, all the little squares, see who's here.
Yeah, there are many people here.
Very exciting.
Okay, so we have some questions from Lindsay Cook. Says, thanks very much for your talk. Can you say more about the form of the hand medals? I'm a medieval art historian, so I'm interested in the connection to ex votos.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we recorded Iris's and Jimena's talk, which was really incredibly fascinating. They are definitely connecting this practice to the rituals connected to ex votos and milagros. And so they showed us this amazing collection of objects throughout various cultures where they're not made with an aesthetic purpose in mind. They have completely different cultural and social functions. And so if I would love to share it, I would just need to ask their permission, but it was really wonderful. It's very rare that we look at objects that are made with a different intent, right? Like they're not made with an aesthetic intent. They're much more ritualistic. And so that's what they base these hand medals on as an act of honoring the healthcare workers.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question from Felice. How does COVID affect your interactive works? Do you have to change how you approach things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was preparing for the seminar with the students, and one of the things that I talk about is how kind of our lives are continuously mediated, and how that changes our relationship to time in making and physical objects, and then of course, like, we were experiencing each other through technology as well. And so that sort of the making impulse, the physical object, becomes even more urgent in a way. So I think about it in all kind of expensive ways here, but just in terms of my current project, it's been, I've been really fortunate to continue to work at Linden because they just schedule me in, and then I'm the only person who comes in at that time. And so that ritual, that sort of recurring thing that I do weekly is really been helpful to me. And then everything else is just kind of like, we meet online and we connect with each other this way, and then we have to work individually. And it's been a challenge where my practice has sort of become this thing that relies on community quite a bit. But I'm trying to figure out what are the possibilities here, right? Like, what are the potentials here? And so my colleagues and my students are helping me figure out a lot of that. Like, for example, Melissa's teaching an online course for us right now. We never considered that that's something that could happen. And so we had to set up a remote computer lab that has Rhino and Keyshot on those computers, and could ask Melissa to teach it for us from Indiana. I mean, it's like, we were sort of forced into the situation, but like, what an amazing outcome. So I'm really trying to pay attention to the things that are working and working well, and the potential for these things. Like, our remote intros are completely hands-on, full-on studio experiences, and the students are doing really good work. And so, I'm just reconsidering a lot of these things that were sort of held as truths.
Yeah, that resonates for me as well. I mean, this has been very tough, but there have been some fantastic takeaways that when this goes back to normal, there are definitely things that I'm keeping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Felice says, thank you so much for answering her question. And I had a question about the previous projects, like the initial plastic bag upcycling project, where you were making those white forms that were installed in a number of different locations. And then it seemed like you were working initially with student assistants or researchers, but then also community. And I was kind of wondering, when you have those kinds of projects, like, are you the Emcee of that project, and where's your reach, and where do the other people kind of have a voice? Like, does that kind of grow like as an organism in terms of how people participate? Like, where's their voice in terms of some of those design considerations or process or anything? And how do you navigate that as an artist?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so, like, we made a little publication at the end, and so all of the students that worked on the project are acknowledged in that publication. And it was quite a few students over a period of 4 years. But the way that, the way that I work with them was that, I sort of say like, here's the intention, like, here's what we want to do. Here's how I figured out how to work with these materials. Here's how I figured out how to come up with these forms. What can you do? Like, so I always sort of lay out the objectives, and if there's readings that I'm doing, like I will have the students do those same readings, and we discuss and we play around with materials together, right? And so I would say I'm the initiator, but then people have quite a lot of agency in terms of where they want to plug in and what they want to do. We had an architecture freshman that worked with us over the summer for 8 weeks, and we showed her every step of the process. We gave her the opportunity to kind of plug in anywhere she wanted to. All she wanted to do for 8 weeks is make string. We had a ton of string after that, but that's what she found meaningful and satisfying, and so she did that. And I would say with the general public, I kind of left a lot of room for them to engage with it the way that they might, right? Like, they came in, I would talk to people and instruct them. I also, the students that work with me learned how to instruct people with the particular steps of the project too. And so they would take a lot of agency in running the workshops too. Like, we had different stations, and people could do sort of super rudimentary things like sort out plastic bags and cut off handles, or make string, and then all the way to crocheting and sewing, right? So people could come in and participate with whatever level of skill they had. But that also meant that we were committed to utilizing whatever was produced. And so that's where that, like, playing with control comes into play, and kind of giving up a lot of control and figuring out, like, okay, here's this blobby thing. How can I make it into something that actually works for the project? And so that was a really fun challenge.
That takes a lot of guts to give up some of that control.
Yeah, but it's sort of like the project really necessitated that.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the group? Let me see if I'm missing anything in the chat. Okay, from Jose Garcia, what are the thematic concerns about tree chair project?
Thematic concerns. Well, I'm really trying to kind of envision these, like, imagine these objects through the lens of the objects themselves, right? Like, not kind of through our lens, human lens, but throughout their own unique phenomenology. And then, of course, the fact that this is, organic growing material, it's going to take time for them to come to fruition. And so I'm thinking about, like, human time versus earth time, and like, our effects on the environment, their environment effects on us, and kind of everything in between, and the kind of the back and forth. Right. And so thinking about, like, how a tree can envision a chair, or foresee or intuit the existence of a chair. How can a chair think of a tree? Like, does the paper remember being a tree? So I'm kind of, like, asking all these speculative questions, and then trying to put physical forms to them, right? Like, trying to come up with physical answers to those questions.
From Natalie Lowe, what kind of trees did you use, and do you intend to allow them to continue to grow after they reach the chair state, or will they be removed to keep them in stasis, so to speak?
Yeah, so we use quake and aspen and poplars. So there are 2 sets that I make with aspens, and then one set of chairs that's made with poplars. And we chose those particular trees because they grow fast, but they also are fairly friendly to grafting. So that's the reasons why they're chosen. And it's like, I have no idea how this is going to work. There's obviously, like, things like arbor sculpture, like people bend trees into objects and things, but this is something really specific, right? Like, I'm trying to force it into right angles and upright backs, and that's just not what chairs want to do. So there's sort of, like, a certain amount of failure built into it from the beginning. They will just do what they're doing. We're gonna tend to them this entire time, and sort of continue to shape them into chairs, but they will stay connected. Like they won't be, I don't know if maybe you're aware of this British project where they're actually growing trees into chairs, and they're growing them upside down and then cutting them off. And that's like, cool furniture that people can now have. They're not done with right angles. They're just, like really bending the trees themselves. We won't be doing that. We won't be removing them. They will be left at the Linden Sculpture Garden as a usable living sculpture.
From Erica Meyer, was it a Pandora's box asking the community to donate or collect plastic bags? Are the community members still collecting them for you? And can you discuss how you found people seeing or experiencing this opportunity?
Yeah, so sorting days were always kind of interesting because you would find other things in the bags, other than just the bags. So it was just kind of more fun rather than, a Pandora's box. I mean, we got some bags we could use because they're just like way too dirty and, unusable. But for the most part, it was just kind of fun, especially once you had enough to have like patterns and colors start to emerge. We removed them. So the Linden Sculpture Garden bought 2 recycling bins for us, and then they were removed at the end of the project. But the director will still tell me that people continue to bring their bags to Linden. I have them all, like they're all in my studio, and because I'm making other objects with those materials, like it's okay right now, but it's, it just underscores this thing. Like here we are for 4 years, multiple people working on this thing, and we didn't even make a dent in all the bags that we've collected. And I'm sorry, there's another part to your question.
Let's see.
I'm not remembering right now.
Sorry. Can you discuss how you found people seeing or experiencing this opportunity?
How I found them?
How have you seen people sort of like experiencing the opportunity of collecting and participating in that part of it? But it seems
sure. Yeah. So it was really, I kind of left. There was at each location there's an explanation of the project, so there'd be like a little poster that tells people what it is, and but people didn't necessarily access that information. Those who wanted to did, but people would come and talk to us about what this was, and if all it was like, oh, we're just doing something with these bags, cool. If that was the level that they wanted to take it to, that was fine, right? Because that gave them something to talk about. And then some people just really found it meaningful, especially in terms of the community. We had this woman, Helen, who just kept, she just came month after month. She came for a really long time. And, we asked her at some point about, what this was for her. And she's like, well, this is way better than the senior center. So we would sit and work and just have these conversations about what we were doing and our lives. And I was also like, 3 out of these 4 years was when I was chair. And so it was the only time when, I didn't have my phone, I didn't have my computer. I could just sit there with the students and the community and talk and do something with my hands. And it was really incredibly meaningful.
Mm-hmm. I have 2 questions, but I have one that I'm just really, really dying to know. How do you make the plastic string? Like, is it a simple process?
It's so easy. I'll come and show you. So what we do is we cut off the bags, the handles of the bags. Then we score the edge. We tear it into these kind of inch long strips, or between half an inch and inch, depending on the thickness of the bag. And then we pull it.
That's it. Okay.
And then tie the ends together. And that's it. And put on a spool. So it's really easy, but it's definitely a very divisive process. Like people either love doing that or they hate it. There's no in between. Mm-hmm. And so like I find it very contemplative to do it, but some people just hate it. Mm-hmm. And then when we tie them together, we just left the ends and then just kind of utilize the ends, sometimes leaving them on the outside of the object, so they were kind of hairy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay.
Or if they're on the inside, that just becomes stuffing.
Yeah, nice. And the other question I had was about your role as an educator in the metals jewelry field. So I think you've done a really fantastic job of kind of like explaining like how you approach materials from the perspective of a metalsmith and jeweler, even just in the way you talked about, you know, digging out the perfect holes and like your understanding of craft. And like even when you're making some of these wearables that are completely in plastic, that you're still thinking about articulating forms and hinged components potentially. When you're teaching and you're working through the curriculum at your school, like, have you ever had like a crisis of like your identity and as your role as a teacher about not really working in metal anymore and teaching in a program that might still depend on like some really traditional approaches and really traditional things that we're still going to use mining? And you mentioned that blacksmithing is still happening. And like, do you have those conversations with your students or ever have kind of these moments of how does that work?
Yeah, we definitely do. I mean, we sort of think about all of this as technology, right? Like new technology, old technology, and we and ways of making, and then sensibility for making, and a sensibility and handling materials. And so, yeah, we teach these classes that are rooted in process, but they also always have a conceptual underpinning, right? Like our casting class is called the multiple, right? And so we explore the possibility of the multiple as a strategy, right? So either for production or the multiple as strategy for art making. And so there's always a lot of room. Like there's room to learn the process, but there's also room to talk about the process as a methodology and the materials as a methodology. And so, you know, no materials are off limits. Like students need to learn specific processes in metal, but they regularly incorporate, they regularly incorporate other materials into their practices. And it's, you know, I mean, one of the things that's also really important to me is that we're putting people out with these professional degrees, right? Like they're BFA students and master level students that are gonna go out into the world, and so it's really important to me that they have the skills they need to be able to compete out there. So a lot of our curriculum, and I don't mean to say by any means that we're a trade program, but it's important that our students are good craft practitioners and know the technology that's used in the industry, know the approaches in the industry. Erica is going to teach our industrial processes class next semester that really prepares students for that. And then, you know, so like we do that, but we also make sure that they get a chance to synthesize those ideas and explore their creative voices, develop their creative voices. And so we have portfolio classes as well, where students really get to choose their own investigations and we guide them through that. Does that answer it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so it's a little after 6 o'clock. Does anybody have any final questions? Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. This was really fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I know it's hard to do a big round of applause via Zoom, but if anybody wants to unmute themselves and say hi and, you know, have some one-on-ones, we can linger for a few minutes.
I'd love to see some faces.
Yeah, show yourselves.